Welcome to Two Girls, One Podium, the podcast where girl talk meets the finish line.
Join your hosts Millie and Jasmine, two besties with a passion for speed, sports and spilling all the tea. Whether we're breaking down the latest race drama, fangirling over our favourite drivers, or just having a laugh about life behind the scenes, we're bringing you the ultimate mix of motorsport and girl power.
So grab your iced coffee, buckle up and let's hit the track because here it's always full throttle and fabulous.
Welcome to our first episode of Two Girls, One Podium. We're going to kick this off by talking to Jazz, my co-host, about how she fell in love with the sport. So Jazz, can you tell me what you love about F1?
So I really like the fast cars. No, I'm kidding. For me, F1 is just a race about strategy. It's all about challenges, whether it comes to the weather, how are they going to respond, what are the drivers going to do, are they in the right headspace? Anything can happen on race day, and this season is no different. So that's why I love F1. And for me, I've been watching for quite a long time. I remember the days of Schumacher, didn't really watch it too closely then. And then I think around COVID time, that's when I started to get really into F1 as a sport. And then from there followed Lewis Hamilton, number 44, as you can see from the shirt. And I went through all the turmoil of, was it 2021 when he was on track to win his 8th, devastated. And then, now he's back at Ferrari and I'm ready to see him win his 8th title. How about you, Millie?
Well, I'm a rookie to the sport myself. I only really fell into it last year. My partner Josh, he got me into it. To be honest, it's mental because I grew up never really knowing much about the sport at all, and my house wasn't particularly sports, central. It was football and that was it, and I didn't actually even realise that there was a sport like this even out there because it never even fell into my orbit. And then Josh introduced me to it last year, and I've been missing so much for all these years, and I feel like I've been robbed. I feel like my childhood was robbed. I didn't understand the sport. I didn't understand the industry. And maybe if I had been introduced to it earlier, I could have been in it. Not driving, but, I could get into the aerodynamics of it. That could have been so much fun. Who knew that it was even a career or anything like that? It's just absolutely mental. But yeah, so last year watched it, and then this year we obviously got up very early this morning to watch the Australian race. I think it was 4 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. That was early, so it was a little bit hazy, but we got there.
We'll scrape some details together. Have to ask you, are you a Drive to Survive fan?
Yes, I haven't watched all of this season yet. We're working our way through it, but there's also quite a lot of controversy behind Drive to Survive 2, so I'm very conscious of not making any decisions on anyone based on the programme because it's so easy to manipulate the footage to suit whatever image they want to put out of that person. But yeah, I am enjoying it. How about you?
I don't watch it. I've never watched it. I think I watched the first 2 episodes by accident because my husband watches it. But yeah, it's very dramatised, and a lot of the footage is chopped and changed to make people out to be more villainous than they are, which I don't really agree with, and I know a lot of the drivers don't. So yeah, for me it's a bit keeping up with the Kardashians. Not that there's anything wrong with that because there's a space for reality TV, but I think it does create a bit of a toxic
100%.
fan base from it, and I think people need to take it with a pinch of salt, watch the race and see just what is true and what isn't.
And when you watch the drivers interact with each other, when you actually see them after the race go and shake each other's hands and congratulate each other, that seems so genuine. That's not really how it's portrayed on Drive to Survive, so I definitely do take the programme with a pinch of salt because it's definitely not real life for sure.
Doesn't sell a storyline when people are friends, does it?
No, obviously not. Oh, we're all pally. Oh, great.
Yeah.
But should we talk about the race today?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, perfect. Right. So obviously it was a very early one for us in the UK. Did you get up for it?
I didn't. I will
I
confess.
didn't think you did when I texted you.
I wanted to. I really wanted to. No, I watched. I got told that the replay was happening at like 8:55, so I got up for the replay. But I watched it as if it was first time. I didn't look at my phone or anything, so I didn't know where anyone had placed. And I saw your message of what a race. I was like, what's going to happen? And then I watched it, and yeah, that was intense for a season opener in Australia.
Yeah. The rain. Should we talk about the rain first?
Let's talk about the rain and what an impact that had. I mean, when it rains in Australia, it usually tends to be pretty crazy. I mean, I don't know if you've caught previous seasons, and in terms of the build up on social media, they shared a lot of what's happened at previous seasons in Australia, and they describe it as greasy. It's a greasy track. It's quite wet, slippery, and I think we saw the result of that. It's like someone spilled dish soap all over the track. Honestly, with the amount of crash outs that we had today. Yeah.
How many was it in total? Do we know?
It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was 6. So we had the rookies. Nearly all the rookies crashed out. Hadja going first. Only one made it. Hadja went first, and I nearly cried for him. It was nice to see him being, looked after by
Lewis's dad. Cute.
Yeah, it was very lovely. I was screaming at the telly, like, oh my god, bless his little heart. Like, he was so upset and he really beat himself up. But I don't think he needs to do that. I mean, if you've got these rookies, including Alonso, he's a rookie in his rookie year.
Alonso's definitely a rookie.
I mean, if you've got Alonso crashing out in his rookie year, and then you've got Carlos Sainz as well, who's not a rookie, he's usually very good in the rain. He also crashed out. I think these drivers could probably, not beat themselves up too much. It's not them. I think it's. I mean, it's
even Max and Lando were talking about how difficult the conditions were and how hard it was to drive under them. And obviously, they're like some of the best. Well, they are the best drivers, at the moment. Yeah. Anyway, and for them to say how difficult it was, the rookies definitely. I mean, it's easier said than done, but they should not beat themselves up at all.
No, I mean, for a season starter as a rookie, I think all the things that you would normally want to go into a race with were pretty much not on their side today. Yeah. And that's why we've seen some of the crash outs. Obviously, I know that we saw Behrman crash out in qualifying, which that wasn't to do with the weather, but how much that has to play. I know that there was a lot of talk today around the torque kicking in, even when they weren't going that fast, and that made them kind of spin out. And you even saw later in the race, that we'll get into the drama of what happened, but even those that didn't look like they were struggling, there were moments where the entire race nearly got lost because of the wetness and like hitting the grass, hitting the gravel, hitting the curbs. I think we saw a lot of drama today because of the rain.
We did, and we saw some crashes, but we also saw some recoveries. There were a couple of recoveries made. Obviously, Piastri's being the biggest recovery in my opinion. He span out, went into the gravel, tried to overcorrect, and then ended up in the grass. And then he was marked as out. Spinning his wheels around and around and around. Crowd were like, what's going on? And then he managed to get himself back onto the track and actually placed some points, which is really impressive because he did fall to the bottom of the grid. So that was an amazing recovery by him.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think as well, there's always the question of, are Australian drivers cursed when they drive at their home race? This is not the first time this has happened to an Australian driver. But I would say that, he did a phenomenal job of getting that car back on track. It looked like he was out and then he managed to get it reversed and back on. And then, to claw points back, pretty impressive stuff. I think Piastri is one to watch this year. The trouble's going to come with McLaren's kind of decision making on how they race, whether they race. Last year was a bit of a fiasco. Put them in some awkward positions between the two drivers. And I know that Piastri's just signed on for another couple of years as well. So I think this is going to be interesting. They are, yeah.
Yeah, it is going to be super interesting. And I completely agree with what you're saying. Hopefully, what are they going to do? They've got to prioritise someone. And obviously both drivers are very loved and they both drive very well. So that is going to be really hard for them to handle.
Yeah, and I think as well you're going to get, obviously, the fan base going a bit crazy. You've got Lando Norris, who's sunk a lot of years into that team, waiting for them to get to this point to come back to their former glory. You know, McLaren, they're no rookies in this race and in this sport. They've won a lot of championships, constructor championships. So I think, you know, you're going to get a bit of a dynamic where people think that Lando should be favoured because he's been there for longer. He's sunk a lot of time into them and into the car. But then Piastri, you know, he's really surprised people. In his rookie year, he did some really great driving, and I think, you know, put Lando under some pressure, which I don't think a lot of people were expecting. Obviously, he had his own drama coming into that whole situation with Alpine and moving into that car. So yeah, I do think we're going to get an interesting dynamic. Some decisions I didn't agree with last year between the two drivers of, you know, letting people
see it.
Exactly, and I think we could see the downfall of McLaren because they get in their own way because their drivers aren't aligned. And I get that it's a brutal sport, someone's got to win, but you know, if you don't set clear boundaries, you could end up with, you know, the likes of what we've seen in the past with Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg, you know, two best friends who were no longer best friends because they had to fight for championship, and you know, they clashed multiple times, and we could see that here. I think the two guys in the McLaren seats are, you know, there's still that level of respect at the moment. I don't think that we'll see a lot of clashes, but does concern me. I mean, I don't know how you feel.
What happens when when they're getting towards the end of the season and their points are pretty level? Like, they are going to be fighting. I mean, it may be behind the track, but I know I'd want to win. And I think Lando was the one who said winning is like a drug, you know? Like, he can't get enough. Like, once you've got the taste of it, you just have to go back for more. So, yeah. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting how they handle it towards the public as well, because I know Lando was, again, painted out to be quite a villain last year with a couple of the things that he said or did. But, like, it's in the moment, you know, and he's passionate about the sport, and I'm not saying that gives anyone an excuse, but it's easy to see how that could happen.
Yeah, adrenaline runs really high, right, in these situations. Like they are flying at speeds that we could only fathom, and you know, you're under a lot of pressure. What I would like to see from Lando Norris though this season is a bit more grit in belief in himself. He has a tendency to beat himself up quite a bit after some reflection. You know, he takes a lot of the blame, or you know, he backtracks on kind of demanding better from other people. And I can understand why he does that, because it is a team sport, and obviously you've got to race these guys every weekend nearly. You see them a lot, and obviously the media really loves to spin a tale, so I understand why he does it. But you know, world champion drivers, if you look at who's won previously, they don't back down, they don't apologise, they just take what they want. And I don't think we're going to see that from Piastri. I think Piastri, I mean, he's already kind of shown, you know, I'm going to do what I need to do to establish myself in this sport. And I think Lando's mistake might be that he tries to play nice. And I get that they have to work together in certain scenarios. But as I said, you don't win a championship by being nice. Sometimes you've got to be the bad guy. And, you know, he's got to get comfortable with that. Would you agree with that? Or do you feel like, you know, it doesn't really matter, it's not important?
I agree. I do think that you have to be the bad guy sometimes. I mean, I look at Max, for an example, you know, like Max doesn't care what anyone thinks of him, and you know, he had an incredible season in, what was it, 2023 was that the season that he
23 where he won nearly back-to-back.
Like, and he didn't care that he was the villain. He was like, but I'm winning, so what does it matter?
Exactly.
So yeah, I totally agree. Someone has to be the bad guy, and the media are always going to spin it however they want. But I do think that one thing that I really love about the sport is that it is a really supportive community. So I do think that the people who are massively into it do tend to see past that. I mean, everyone loves a villain, don't get me wrong. But yeah, I do think he'll be all right. He just needs to, like you say, have a bit more grit.
Yeah, and you know, I it's easy for us to sit here and say that we're not sat in a car, being a certain type of way, but I think, you know, there comes a point where you want this enough. It shouldn't matter. Like, just go and get your goal. Like, obviously, you're not trying to be intentionally malicious or anything like that, but you know, if you want to win, you gotta put your foot down, literally. Yeah, literally. So, moving on, back to the race. That was enough about McLaren, I think.
Yeah, I know.
I wanted to talk about the game I like to play of yellow flag, red flag. And I wanted to talk to you about this. So, obviously, with a lot of rain comes a lot of flags. And I don't think it's any surprise that we saw a lot of yellow flags. The question I have is, should there have been a red flag or 2 or 3? And the reason I say this is because there was a lot of trucks on track, and obviously we've lost people from trucks being on track. And, you know, a couple of years ago, there was the situation with Gasly where he nearly went into a back of a tractor. Because it was absolutely pouring down with rain, and I get that, you know, visibility was high, but the issue is it just takes one person to hit a bit of slippery road, and they're going into that. And obviously you've got not the stewards, but the marshals on track as well trying to clear this, and it's not a wide track. So, you know, I think there's some concerns there, and the FIA really needs to set a rule and stick to it. If I was the drivers, I wouldn't have been too happy about that. I know that the commentators as well, you know, mentioned the fact that it just takes one mistake, and it was all in the same place that other people had made a mistake to come and do something dodgy. So, yeah, I wanted to see from your perspective, do you think they should have red flagged the race in more than one occasion?
I totally agree. I did see, obviously, there was many yellow flags, and I did sit there and I did think, that's interesting. That's interesting that is a yellow flag and not a red. But, I mean, obviously, again, I'm a little bit of a rookie to the sport, so I was just assuming that the right people were making the right decisions. But now that you've mentioned that, like, maybe I was right. Maybe I was thinking the right thing. Like, it's so dangerous. They are traveling so fast, and like, it's all well and good when it's not your life at hand, but they are still people at the end of the day. Like, they need protecting, and the fact that they didn't put out a red flag is absolutely mental to me. But like we said earlier, there was like 5 crashes, and like the one was a massive truck, and you saw them like put Aston Martin on the back of it, right? And it was in the middle of the road, and because it's a street race, road wasn't that
it's a temporary track,
right.
And I think
wasn't enough room.
No, and for me, that I think the point that really drove home, I think it was on the second or last yellow flag, where the Aston Martin had to go off road a little bit because the truck was coming round, but Lando couldn't. He's not going to want to go through all that gravel that sticks to your tyres, you know. You run the risk of a puncture, you lose temperature in your tyres, and also it's just, you know, it's not wise to go through that. So he had to slow down, but what's the point in the safety car if you're not going to protect him from the truck that he could potentially go into the back of? You know, these are thin cars made of carbon fibre. You see the crashes that they've had, you look at the damage, like some of them weren't even going that fast, some of them were even under a safety car at the time that they crashed. If that's all it takes, imagine going into a truck that's a lot heavier and has a lot more, you know, rigid metal around it. I dread to think. I think they're playing a risky game, the FIA, and as much as I don't like to see red flags in wet, because I think it does kind of lead into, should they really be driving in the wet? And obviously we do want to see that because it creates a very interesting race. I do feel like there was more that could have been done. You don't ever like to see an F1 car behind a truck like that, and then the safety car going off road to avoid it. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, like you say, yes, we all want to see the excitement of the race, but it's not worth people's lives at the end of it, you know, like.
No,
it's just not, and yeah, the FIA should have made better decisions there for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree. So let's hope they, you know, learn the lesson from this. I wouldn't be surprised if the Drivers' Association has some comments around, you know, what happened today, and the safety of the drivers on the track. But yeah, I'd like to see better from them.
More about it. Yeah, definitely not the end of it for sure. People are going to pick up on that and keep pushing for some answers. So maybe by next time they might have given us a better explanation as to why, but we'll see.
Will we? It's the FIA
probably
after all.
No, yeah, they'll probably just brush it off like everything else.
Yeah. Five penalty points for Ocon, probably. That's always the way, isn't it? He always gets a penalty for something or other.
Talking about penalty points, I'd actually like to talk about a couple of the unsafe releases in the pit, because there was a couple of them today, especially for the rookies. And obviously they're under enough pressure as it is, and I know people make mistakes, don't get me wrong, but I do feel like they were let down in the pit lane a little bit, because they get the penalty, it's not their fault, they're trusting other people to let them out, and they're also like, it's their first race, you know. Obviously we had, who did we have? We had Kimi, who was initially told he was going to have a 5-second penalty, but they retracted that at the end, so I think he actually came 4th instead of 5th. Because he would have dropped down with the 5-second.
Yeah, Albon would have gone up.
He's come back up. Yep, perfect. And then we also had, who else was let out? unsafely.
Was it
Bortoletto.
Bortoletto? That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, he was let out unsafely as well. I don't know if he received the penalty or not, but they were a bit further down.
I think he did. I think he did get a 5-second. Yeah, I think you're right. You know, it is up to the teams to make sure that they're being released safely. And I get that, you know, there's always a risk of that happening. We've seen it loads of times before to drivers that are very experienced. But I do think it was unfortunate. And as I said at the beginning, I think everything that could have gone wrong for the rookies today probably did. And yeah, it's a little frustrating to see that. You know, it's up to the team to make sure that they are safe. But it's a learning lesson. You know, I'm hoping that, you know, the drivers will have a conversation with their teams about that, and hopefully we don't see it again throughout the season.
Yeah, because I think Bortoletto almost took out Max in the pit lane. Yeah.
Was it Max or was it Lawson? We should probably do some more research on this. Yeah. And I did want to talk about, because obviously we talk about penalties, and under one of the safety cars, at one point I thought all the drivers on the grid were going to get investigated for an infringement under the safety car. Exclamation points just popping up. I was like, how many are we going to get? Obviously, in the end, most of them got dropped. I think it was only there was only one driver in the end who got penalised for that. It might have been Yuki. Was it Yuki or was it Alonso? Was it not Yuki? He got investigated, didn't he? And then I think they dropped his.
He did get investigated, but I think it got dropped on him. I mean, talking about Yuki, he drove most of the race really, really well. It's unfortunate he came a little bit further down, but he was doing some really good driving. And I mean, personally, I would have liked to see him in the Red Bull seat. That's an opinion, so no one shoot me for that. But I think he would have been really good in the Red Bull seat, and I think some of his driving today really did display that. But yeah, I was impressed with him today, because he doesn't always drive like that.
No, and you know, maybe the V-carb, well, they're not called V-carb anymore, but the V-carb car, you know, maybe it is up there in terms of speed and pace, and it can, you know, we can see it more up in the pack this season. But I do feel like it is a bit of a question mark of, have you put the wrong driver in the Red Bull? You know, this is the question that everyone's going to be asking this season. Lawson is under a lot of pressure, and you know, it does make you think that if even Lawson, who's someone who's going to come in with quite a lot of confidence, and you know, hasn't really been tainted by a car's build, because he's going from F2 to F1. You know, he's done a few races before in the car, but it's not really anything to establish himself, and he's struggling to drive that car. Is it too tailored towards Max? Do they care about winning the Constructors' Championship? Because you need two drivers to do that, you know. And I do have that question of, we're going to see a lot of kind of back and forth this year, I think, on whether Lawson was the right person in that seat. I wouldn't want to be him because of that. No. But I think, you know, Yuki's got a point to prove, and what a way to start.
Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree. And I think obviously Max was racing very well today. I think he finished within, I think it was 0.8 seconds.
It was tense. It was very tense.
The last couple laps were, I was like, there's not enough laps. He can't overtake. There's not enough laps. But it is Max, so I don't want to write anything off, because he's pretty risky as well. And I think, obviously, if the conditions had been a little bit different, maybe he would have attempted to overtake. But he didn't. Lando won, and I think that's, a great start for McLaren.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's interesting, right? Because I don't think anyone really thought the Red Bull was going to be up that high for the start of the season, you know, qualifying and practice. They've been struggling with that car. The pace doesn't seem to have looked in it. And, you know, during the middle section of that race, Max did drop off. Once Piastri took him over, it's like he lost everything in those tyres. It was a bit in no man's land. You know, you saw the McLarens pull away. And I think, you know, Max has always got the ability to drive really well in the rain. When there's rain, I know Max is going to pull something, because he just knows how to drive, right? I can't take anything away from him for that. He will pull something off when it's raining. But I feel like it kind of went, and then obviously we saw what happened to the McLarens, where they both went off track, and then Piastri obviously spun off and basically drifted all the way off onto the grass, and that was Max's opportunity. And I think that's the thing that you can see from Max every single race, is that he, in a way, drives like he's got nothing to lose. You know,
Yeah.
those tyres had nothing left in them, and you know they were on inters, and the track was starting to dry towards those last few laps of the race, and he still managed to hold on. And I agree. I think if he had a little bit more in the car, and you know he was on slicks, we might have seen a different story. But I think it is a good question mark of where will the Red Bulls actually be this year. I think you know, McLaren's look fast, but it could not always go their way, and Max just knows how to pull something out of the bag.
Yeah, 100%. And the one thing I did notice, though, is Max very rarely makes mistakes, right? Very, very rarely.
Yeah.
He did make a mistake today.
And it was big.
Oh, it took me by surprise. I thought, is that Max?
Yeah.
Didn't look like Max to me. So he's probably kicking himself over that because he's definitely not one to make a mistake. But shows that he's not a robot. He's for sure human, you know, there's definitely always the opportunity to just sit there and wait if he does get up to the top. Not saying I don't want Max to win, because, you know, it's fine if he wins. It's not personally my favourite team, Red Bull, but, you know, like, it's nice to see all the teams win, to be honest. So, yes, just sit there and wait. Eventually he'll make a mistake for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing though, right? Is it really goes to show that some of the teams sometimes need Max to make a mistake in order to be in the standings, and you know that goes to show just how well Red Bull have been doing with their car. Obviously, Max as a driver, you know, he can drive the hell out of that car, and you can see that each season. But I think this year it's going to be interesting. You know, the top 10, it was a real mix of cars, and then obviously we had all those safety cars which kept changing and all of the layout. But I think we need to talk about Williams, because for me, they are coming back, and I'm so excited. I was gutted for Carlos Sainz that he obviously crashed out. Was really hoping that he would, you know, show some kind of middle fingers up a little bit to Ferrari of look what you've lost. But Albon still coming in 5th. What an absolute drive from Alex Albon. I was really impressed.
I was very impressed, and I love Williams. I have a real soft spot for them, and I do think that this year could be a really good year for them. I don't think they're gonna win the constructors. Don't get me wrong. I'm not over fantasizing, but I do think that they could really push for the higher of the mid teams, and I think that would be a really great success. And I do think a lot of that. I know Sainz obviously crashed out today, but I do think that he has given that team so much knowledge. And I do think that has helped and it contributed to the result today. I mean, don't get me wrong, Albon drove amazingly, but like you say, it's a team sport. Although there's one driver in the seat, well, 2 drivers, but it's a team sport. It's all about what goes on behind the scenes to be able to make what happens on the track happen, right? So, yeah, I think they really should, Ferrari really should maybe, you know, keep a watchful eye, because they weren't bad.
No, and I mean, like, obviously, Lewis going to Ferrari it's a game changer for them. You know, he brings in a lot of sponsorship. He's got a massive fan base, and I'm trying not to be too biased here, but I am happy to see him in red. It kind of feels like a full circle moment. You know, he's been driving for such a long time, and he's kind of gone through some of the greatest teams, so you know, to end on Ferrari makes the most sense to me. But I do think Williams, they've got a really good chance this year, and I know that they're kind of focusing on even next year's car, so next season's going to be interesting when the regulations change. But I think, you know, the 2 drivers that they've got, this could be a dream team. You've got Albon, who he knows how to drive, and he's usually pretty consistent even when the car's not there. And I want to pose a question to you. Do you think Red Bull made a mistake dropping Albon when they did? Do you think he should be in that? He should have been in that car for the last couple of seasons over Checo Perez, or do you feel like this is kind of a good direction for him and he's got a chance to prove himself?
I mean, that's a really difficult question, because I actually didn't see him race in Red Bull. However, I did see Perez race in Red Bull. And that was shocking. It was, sorry. It wasn't great. Maybe you're right. Maybe they tailored the car just more towards Max, and that meant that it just wasn't fitting Perez well. But obviously Max carried them the whole of last season, and Perez didn't even finish the season with Red Bull. So, he wasn't a good fit for Red Bull, in my opinion. Albon, You say he's quite consistent, and I don't disagree, and I adore him. I think he's really great. Last season definitely wasn't for him, and I don't know whether that was his driving style or whether it was the car, or maybe a combination of both. But I think with having signs with him is going to encourage him to be a better driver, because he was number one, right? And I'm not saying that Sainz is now in number one seat, but I mean, Sainz came from the higher team, so take that as you will.
There's a lot of history and experience being brought into that team, and I think that's only going to benefit Albon 100%.
Yeah, and I think that they could really work well together, and I do think they've taken. I was listening to a couple of podcasts earlier this week, and I know they've taken a lot of information on from Sainz. I know that he's spoken to the technical team a lot, you know, like making sure that they understood what the other teams had done in the past. And I think that, yeah, that's going to benefit everyone in the team. And I'm really excited to see where they are this season.
Yeah, I have to say, though, I really wish Daniel Ricciardo was in that Red Bull seat.
I knew you'd say that.
I'm so gutted he's not. Everyone's a Danny Rick fan. He's missed it. Like, he brings so much personality to the grid, and not having him, it feels like a major blow. And yeah, I would love to have seen him finish his season in a Red Bull. I think the way his season ended last year, for someone who's put so much into the sport and is such a big, a big name, everyone knows him as the guy who smiles and brings everyone out of their shell a little bit. I think to have his season end the way it did, it really doesn't feel fair. And even if he didn't do well in the Red Bull, it would have been nice to just see him out properly. Yeah. So yeah, I'm gutted. I do love Daniel Ricciardo.
I agree, and I do think he's a massive personality. Like you say, I started watching it first last year, and he was one that really stuck out to me as being just like a real genuine guy, like there for the vibes. And I don't think he was a bad driver, but again, like, is that second seat cursed? Because it does seem to be like Max has such a big shadow, and like if you're sat in that, and also they're tailoring the car towards him. I'm not saying they are, but I'm just saying if they are, like, everyone in that second seat is going to be set up to fail. It just facts.
Yeah, like, and I think you're right. I mean, how much of that shadow is the rest of Red Bull pulling the strings? That's what I want to know, because they don't seem so caught up in the fact that they're not winning the Constructors' Championship. And, I do have questions around that. Like, it's great that they want to prioritise Max. Like, it's great for Max because, he can win, and we've seen him dominate for the last couple of years. But yeah, I do think that, will this come to bite them later on? Lawson seems like a character who's not going to sit and kind of hand stuff to Max. Not that I think the other drivers that have been in that seat have been either, but we saw last year he had some choice fingers to share with some of the other drivers. He seems to be someone who likes to speak his mind, and I think there could be some trouble in the Red Bull garage for that.
I agree. I don't think Lawson's one to bite his tongue at all. And yeah, I do think, as much as he probably respects Max for obviously his brilliant racing, when you are that person in that second seat, I'd be having a lot of questions too. And I would probably be demanding quite a lot as well, making sure that I was getting my fair share. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that. That second seat's a difficult position to fill. And
yeah,
I mean, maybe if they did want a yes man, not saying Yuki's a yes man, but I do think Yuki is probably more of a team player than Lawson. So it was a strange choice, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you'd be saying Yuki is a team player if you saw his previous seasons, but I do think last year, he really put his head down.
He did, yeah. Last season, he was definitely trying to bring the team up rather than just himself. I know he's sometimes one to throw his toys out the pram.
I love that, though. I love the drama that Yuki brings.
But I don't think he's as, maybe as, what's the right word? Not brutal, but I don't know what the word is. He's more...
There's something about Lawson that makes me feel like he's a bit hot-headed, and I've got nothing to base that on because we've not really seen it.
It's the hair. His hair's quite wild. It's like it screams like steam coming out the top. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, obviously we don't know that yet until things start to happen, and he's got to get further up the pack for us to see that. And obviously this race just wasn't the one for the rookies to really show what they have. I'm down for it though. I think it's nice to see Max challenged, and not because I don't think he enjoys it. Max loves to drive and he loves to race. I actually don't really think he gets a bit bored just being out in front all the time. So this season is interesting. He might be enjoying himself a bit more because he can really race the other teams. But when he's racing his own teammate, he's not really had to do that throughout a lot of his time at Red Bull. And I know that's like a topic that a lot of people bring up, is that he's never really had to race his own teammates. So I would like to see it just to see how he responds. Will he step up to the plate? Will it get to him? Max is pretty. He likes to do his own thing and he calls the shots. He's not afraid to not be liked. But how will that go down when it's his own team? How will Red Bull respond to that? We've seen a little bit in the past between him and Checo, and it looked like they didn't really support Perez for that much. But obviously that's just what we see. We don't get all the insight to that. But yeah, I want to see Lawson up there. I want to see how Max responds to that, and is how Lawson will respond as well, because I don't know how he's gonna act.
Yeah, I agree. I think obviously we're seeing that with McLaren, and it would be great to see it with Red Bull. And I mean the top three teams, it would be great to see it between all of them, because then you can see really whose interest they have at heart, whether it is the driver's interest or whether it is the team's interest, and that's what is interesting to me.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. I think as well, like this year, I'm seeing some changes in some of the drivers. We've got an outspoken Leclerc. He's been, those radio messages that I heard today were a little bit spicy, It was like too much information.
I'm surprised though, like talking about Ferrari, what happened today? Because the strategy, I don't know who their strategy person is. But I won't want to be them, because
do they know who their strategy person is?
They're gonna be getting a slap on the wrist, because it was tragic to say the least. They kept them out one lap too many when they needed to put those intermediates on. They knew the rain was coming. What were they doing? Were they trying to see if they could make it round without changing the tyres? Should they maybe have not put them into the intermediates? When they put them into the intermediates, should they maybe have just left them out, rather than leaving them out one lap too many, then bringing them in, and then it's like, right, well, the track's kind of almost dry now anyway.
Yeah, and I think this is it, right? The drivers were saying we should come in. Lewis had been on the radio and said, these tyres have no grip, the rain's coming, we should do inters. And that didn't happen. And we've seen this from Ferrari before, and I'm hoping that now that Lewis is there, he can start to change that dynamic. And I feel like he's given, Charles some confidence to actually speak up for what he wants. But they still weren't listened to today, and I completely agree. They tried to do a ballsy strategy. It really didn't pay off, and by that point, it's too late. You've already bit the bullet. You're hung out to dry or wet this time. I guess you're washing squat in the rain.
Yeah, literally.
So yeah, I think they did mess up. Obviously, they managed to still end up okay, but they were split. Yeah, I think it really did work out in their favour, and I would like to see a different dynamic from Ferrari with their strategy. I just don't think they get it quite right. And obviously there's a dynamic piece here as well with Lewis. He's got to find the right way to work with them and communicate. There was a lot of radio messages back and forth of, leave me to it. Yeah. He was very polite about it, more polite than Charles was. But yeah, I don't know how much patience he's going to have for that. He's very used to working with Bono, and they were a pretty close team.
They were a close
duo. They'd been working together for years. Exactly. I'd love to have seen Bono at Ferrari, but I don't think we're going to get that ever. So, we need to figure it out.
I agree. And the thing is, like, I'm all for taking risks. Like, if a lot of the time people come in pole position because they have taken a risk, and I get it. But, like, why do it to both of your drivers? Why not risk it with one and take it with the other? I guess you'd then have the imbalance of, oh, you did this to me, which I get, but also, why not just listen to your drivers? They are telling you what it's like. And you heard so many radio messages of Lewis being like, yeah, mate, it's wet, it's slippy. It's like, as you said at the beginning of this, it's like driving on grease. Like, what do you want me to do? Oh, you're at the front now. yeah, for how long? Because I'm on the wrong tyres.
Yeah, and I could easily slide off. And is it worth it? I mean, I do debate it because you're not talking to a rookie. You're talking to a 7-time, nearly 8-time world champion. If you know, if you watch that season, you know, I think he knows how to drive. And Lewis has always been really good in the rain as well. You know, he's one of the drivers up there with Verstappen who knows how to respond in that situation. We've seen it time and time again where he's made the call on the tyres and it's worked out because he knows what he's doing. I think Ferrari really need to learn to listen to their drivers a little bit more. And obviously Carlos was quite pushy. He used to tell them what he wanted to do. So I think we'll see more of that this season. And I get that it's kind of the first race there. But yeah, I feel like they let their team down today.
Yeah, I definitely agree. They did let them down, and yeah, I mean, it was almost insulting that they didn't even take into account the experience that they have on the track, and they're the ones driving in the rain. You know, they're the ones putting their lives at risk. You know, just listen to your team. It's well, listen,
exactly.
Not listen to your team. Listen to your driver. Team, listen to your driver.
Yeah, or drivers, I should say, because you know, as I said, Leclerc is getting more confident in terms of talking. Sorry, I've got to plug my laptop in because it is going to die. Yeah, he seems to be getting a lot more confident in terms of speaking his mind and, you know, getting a little bit sassy with it, which I like to see. I like to see drivers take control. Like, yes, it's a team sport, but they have got a lot to lose if they don't speak their mind. And, you know, again, I take it back to how many world championship winners have been nice people.
Yeah. Well, you nice probably can't on the track.
Yeah, on the track. It's obviously off track. Don't know them personally, so like, they seem pretty chill to me. But yeah, on the track, you know, they don't hold back. They get their elbows out, and you know, if you name a lot of the previous winners, they've all been that person willing to go to that extent and to demand better from their team. You know, we used to hear it from Lewis on the radio. He'd demand better from the team. Max always is, you know, questioning, like, this car isn't how I want it. Let's do this. We need to do that. Or he makes the calls. You know, I don't think Alonso would have won his titles if he hadn't have been saying this is how I want to win. I wasn't around. I wasn't watching it when Alonso was winning, to be honest. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the drivers change. And obviously, a lot of the taking the rookies out. A lot of these drivers, and obviously we've had a lot of seat changes this year. Yeah. I think we're going to, you know, there really is no calling how things are going to go because a lot of them seem to be going to their new teams and being pretty firm with those teams of this is how I want to operate. And, you know, we'll see some clashes. We'll see some amazing wins, I'm sure, and like amazing moments. But yeah, it seems like everyone's demanding quite a bit from their teams. And it's only the first race. Yeah,
I mean, and as they should, you know, they should demand from their teams. And I know, like, sometimes it looks like they are being spoiled brats, but they're not. They're just asking for what they need to win, and that's the end goal, right, is to win. So
yeah, exactly. You get a lot of people saying that, like, you know, oh, they're crying over the radio, and like I understand where that's coming from, but I do think, you know, these guys aren't going 2 mile an hour. They're taking corners over 100 kilometers an hour, terrifying speeds. The adrenaline is high. You've got to do that and be consistent for, you know, over an hour, if not more. And to expect them to be okay with a car that's not performing for them, the whole point is that the car needs to perform, right? Yeah. You've seen in previous years, and you know, it's a lot better now. They can race a lot more closely together, and we are seeing a lot of that. But in previous years, you'd have really big gaps between people, and if your car's not good enough, you don't win. Like, you can't get away from that, right? You could be a phenomenal driver, but if your car isn't there, you don't win. And if you're used to winning, or you are really wanting to win, and it feels like it's close, that you could be within those points, or you could be on the podium, you're going to be annoyed that your car is not performing. Yeah. It's going to come, you know, you're not going to be polite about that whilst you're driving at those kinds of speeds.
And why would you? Why would you settle? Like, why would you?
Doesn't make a winner. It doesn't make a winner. I can tell you that.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Well, I think we covered quite a lot there. Is there anything else you kind of wanted to go over, or I think we covered most of my points.
I think we should talk about predictions for the next race. So obviously China, I think, is the next race.
Yes,
in a couple of weeks' time.
No, I think it's next
week.
Based on
next week? Okay, so even closer then. So based on what we've seen today, it's going to be quite hard to call, but I want to know, what's your top 3?
Well, because this isn't fantasy, obviously we've got our fantasy league going on, and I did not do well. But I mean, in fairness, they don't give you a very big budget to start
They
with,
don't.
so
I blew
was
mine really
struggling
quickly without noticing. I tried to have
too.
Max, Lando, and Lewis. I was like, oh, yeah, no, run out of money.
It's like, oh, that's how a fantasy league works. I
Yeah.
see. You have to complete the whole thing. I was like, no, I'll just have 3 drivers. It's fine. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it.
Oh,
No,
good.
You have to complete it. Anyway, I think the McLaren are gonna. I think they're going to be 1-2 for the next few races. I think some of the cars need some alterations to really catch up with them. Obviously, they're both great drivers, but Max is also a brilliant driver, and I think he is pushing that car. But I think he's pushing that car to the limit, and I don't know how far that's going to get him with the way that the McLarens drive. So I would say Oscar, Norris, and Max.
You think Oscar's going to win?
I think he's got it in him.
Okay.
For sure. I think don't get me wrong, I don't think, no, sorry, that's not the order I think they're in.
Oh,
I think
okay.
Oscar will win one.
Oh, yeah, for
this
sure.
year.
I
think he still makes a few mistakes that I don't think Lando makes.
Yeah, I agree.
But he's newer to it than Lando, and like you say, Lando's been with McLaren for years, so he's grown with the car, and I do think Oscar, again, his tyre management isn't always the best, and he sometimes just clips bits that he shouldn't. He sometimes, and like we saw today, tries to overcorrect and then has a little, which again, not judging. I couldn't drive a car that fast, but from what I've seen, those are the bits that let him down. I don't think it's the speed or the passion.
Yeah.
I think it's the tiny mistakes that people just seem to find a lull in with, and that's why, again, like you saw the beginning of this race where it was Max got back in front of Oscar quite quickly after the first corner. And I'm not saying Oscar could have done anything to prevent that, but maybe he could have. And maybe it is those little mistakes which let Max slip in, or another driver, for example. But yeah, I think it would probably be Lando, Max, then Oscar for the next one. How about you?
Okay, that's interesting. I will go Lando, Oscar, and then we might get a Ferrari on the podium. I
thought you were going to say Lewis.
I don't know if it'll be Lewis. I'm going to go Leclerc, because I don't think, obviously, Lewis has got to get to grips with that car, with that team.
Yeah.
And he's obviously no rookie, but there's always a learning curve, and it's not like he's had loads of time in the car. Mercedes wouldn't let him test last season, so he's only had a short stint in that car. So I think I don't think a race is off the table for this year. I just don't know when that will be, but at the moment I think we're going to see that. I think Max will be close, and to be fair, obviously I'm just guessing, but as you said, it only takes one person to make a mistake, and Max can see them from a mile off, and he will take advantage, and people will need to be on it. So that's my prediction for next week. I wanted to ask you, final question, who's your driver of the day?
Now this is a difficult one for me, because like I was talking about Oscar making mistakes, and he did make a couple of mistakes, but he didn't give up, and I think that's why he's my driver of the day, because he still got McLaren some points, and I just really admire the grit that he had today to just not give up. Like, he was marked as out, and he was marked as out for like 10-20 seconds, and he just thought, no, I'm not taking that, I'm going, I'm going to make this work. So yeah, he's my driver of the day, followed by Albon.
I'll go for Albon. I'll go for Albon just to make it fair, but
okay,
so you can take Piastri, I'll take Albon. But yeah, I think he drove a phenomenal race. Didn't really hear much from him or about him, and you don't normally in a lot of these races. You don't really hear much about Albon. So yeah, I think to get that high up in a Williams, we are in for some interesting drives, and I think Carlos would have been up there. I don't think he would have been too far behind, if not ahead, if he hadn't crashed out. So look forward to seeing what the Williams can do next race.
Yeah, I'm super excited for next race. and I think it's another early one, which I might.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. I thought.
Catch the replay like I did.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely going to catch the replay that next time. I couldn't miss today. It's been too long.
You're a better woman than I am.
I don't blame you for only watching the replay. I mean, you didn't check your phone either, which is better than I would have done. I would have opened my phone and been like, ugh.
Yeah.
Well, that was a waste
It's the one rule. I was like, if I'm not getting up, I'm not looking at my phone. That's the only way I could do it, because I'll get spoiled. I follow all of them on social media, and don't want to get ruined. I guess we should plug our socials.
Yeah.
And thank people for listening, because we've been going on for 50 minutes.
We have been rambling on. So pretty much, guys, follow us on our socials. It's at obviously at Two Girls One Podium, all for the latest updates, behind the scenes content, and extra race day gossip. That's on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and you can also find us on YouTube.
Yeah.
So
thank you everyone for listening, and we'll be back next week after the next race.
Yeah. Catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.